Introduction. The kind of strength no one sees. We have a confused relationship with strength. We tend to identify it with loudness, confidence that fills a room, certainty that does not waver, the person who speaks first and longest, the one who never seems rattled, the performance of capability so consistent that it begins to look effortless. This is not strength, or rather, it is one narrow expression of strength, and not always the most durable one. The loudest version of confidence is often the most brittle. Certainty without doubt is usually certainty without depth, and the person who never seems rattled has often simply learned to hide the rattling very well. There is another kind of strength. It is quieter. It does not announce itself. It does not require an audience or a moment to shine. It operates in the spaces between the visible actions, in the decision to continue when continuing is not required, in the gentleness that costs something to maintain, in the honesty that serves the relationship more than it serves the moment. This kind of strength is the subject of this book. The quiet strength does not mean passive strength. It does not mean small, modest, or self-effacing. It means the kind of strength that persists when the external motivation has gone. That holds firm when there is no one watching. That is kind without needing to be seen being kind. That is discipline not because discipline is impressive but because it serves something worth serving. Most of what we build that lasts is built by people who have this kind of strength. It is less visible than the loud version, which is perhaps why it is less celebrated. But it is the deeper resource. The one that does not run out when the applause stops or the pressure builds. This book is an exploration of that resource, and how to develop it in yourself. Chapter 1. Stillness is not weakness. The first confusion about quiet strength is the association between stillness and weakness. We live in a culture that equates busyness with productivity, noise with confidence, and urgency with importance. The person who is always moving, always speaking, always generating activity is perceived as driven and capable. The person who sits quietly, thinks before speaking, and moves with deliberateness is perceived, in certain environments, as not quite fully engaged. This perception is almost exactly backwards. The stillness that comes from a strong center is not the absence of motion. It is the presence of choice. The person who is always moving is often being moved, by anxiety, by the need for external validation, by the discomfort of their own company. The person who can be still has usually developed something the restless person lacks: the capacity to be with themselves without needing the noise to fill the space. This matters for more than comfort. It matters for decision-making. The quality of your decisions is directly related to the quality of the space you create before making them. Decisions made from agitation produce different outcomes than decisions made from stillness. Not always. Sometimes urgency is real and requires immediate action. But most of the decisions that shape the direction of a life are not time-critical in the way we treat them. Most of them would benefit from the clarity that stillness makes possible. Stillness is also where information arrives that noise drowns out. The sense that something is not quite right. The recognition that a relationship has shifted. The quiet knowing that precedes the conscious understanding. These signals are available to everyone, but they are only perceptible in the absence of constant distraction. Developing the capacity for stillness is not a passive project. It requires the active cultivation of practices that create space, reflection, time alone, the deliberate slowing of responses, the development of patience with ambiguity. These are disciplines. They require effort, and the people who have them are not doing less than the people who are always in motion. They are doing something harder, maintaining the ground from which genuine action becomes possible. Chapter 2. The strength of consistency. Quiet strength is most visible, if visible at all, in patterns over time, not in moments. The dramatic version of strength is memorable because it has a shape. The conversation where someone stood their ground. The moment of crisis where someone rose to it. The decision that changed everything. These moments exist, and the strength they require is real. But they are not where most of a life is built. Most of a life is built in the invisible repetitions. The daily practice that produced the capability that made the moment possible. The relationship maintained through consistent small attention over years. The habit of honesty that meant the difficult conversation was not, in fact, that difficult, because the pattern was already established. This is the strength of consistency, and it is one of the least celebrated forms of strength because it has no climax. It does not make a good story. You cannot point to the single moment and say, "That was where it happened." It happened across 10,000 moments that no one was watching, each one contributing something too small to measure but together producing something impossible to miss. Consider the person you most respect for their character. Not for a particular achievement or a famous moment, but for who they are. The quality you most admire in them was almost certainly built the way all character is built. Through repeated choices, in ordinary circumstances, to be a particular kind of person. Through saying what they mean, doing what they say, showing up when it would have been easier not to, treating people well when there was nothing to gain from it. This is not glamorous, but it is the actual substance of the life that earns your respect. The practical question is, what are your invisible repetitions? What are the small, daily choices you are making across the areas that matter most? Not the dramatic decisions, those are, by definition, rare. But the texture of ordinary days. What you return to when things are difficult. How you treat people who have less power than you. Whether you do the thing you said you would do, even when no one is tracking it. These patterns are building something whether you are intentional about them or not. The quiet strength is the choice to build them deliberately. Chapter 3. Kindness as Strength. Kindness is almost always misclassified in the taxonomy of strength. In many environments, kindness is considered a soft quality, something nice to have, but not a marker of capability or seriousness. It belongs to a different category than strength. To warmth, maybe, or emotional intelligence, or social grace. But strength? Strength is decisive and focused and willing to make hard calls without excessive sentiment. This is exactly backwards. Genuine kindness, not performance, not people-pleasing, not the anxious generosity of someone who cannot bear disapproval, is one of the hardest capacities to maintain over time. It requires the consistent regulation of your own emotional state under conditions that do not deserve your best. It requires giving attention and care to people who may not be immediately rewarding to attend to. It requires, in many situations, prioritizing the well-being of the other person over the comfort of the interaction for you. This is work. It is harder than being sharp or distant or professionally bounded. The professional who does not get involved is protecting themselves. The person who maintains genuine warmth under pressure has built something that costs real energy to sustain. There is also the question of what kindness accomplishes. The research on leadership, on teams, on long-term relationships of every kind, consistently shows the same thing. Environments where people feel genuinely cared for produce better outcomes than environments where care is treated as irrelevant to performance. The leader who creates safety, who is known to treat people well even when things go wrong, builds trust that translates into discretionary effort, honest feedback, and loyalty that survives difficulty. None of this means kindness without standards. The kindest thing you can do for someone is often not the most comfortable thing. Honest feedback, clearly given. High expectations, consistently held. Accountability that respects the person enough to take their choices seriously. These are all expressions of genuine care. Kindness is not the absence of difficulty. It is the presence of care within the difficulty. Chapter 4. Patience in a Culture of Now. One of the ways quiet strength is tested most frequently in modern life is through the demand for immediate results. The culture has accelerated dramatically. Response times have compressed from days to hours to minutes to seconds. The expectation of immediate availability, in communication, in commerce, in feedback, has reshuffled the baseline for what normal feels like. And when everything moves fast, the person who can still think in years and decades, who can work towards something that will not be visible for a long time, is operating against the grain of their environment. Patience is not waiting passively. It is the active maintenance of commitment over time, in the face of the pressure to abandon it. It is the willingness to stay invested in a direction when the feedback is slow, when the results are not yet commensurate with the effort, when other people have moved on to the next thing. The things worth building are almost always built on timescales that require patience. Relationships, expertise, financial stability, creative mastery, physical capability, institutional trust, none of these are assembled quickly. They are compounded over time through consistent investment, and they are most vulnerable to destruction in the phase when the investment has been real but the return is not yet visible. This is the patience gap. The period between when you begin doing the right thing and when the right thing begins to produce visible results. The patience gap is where most people give up, not because they lack desire or intelligence or even resources, because the absence of visible feedback in the short term feels like evidence that the direction is wrong. The patience gap is not evidence that the direction is wrong. It is the normal feature of building anything real. Developing patience is partly a matter of lengthening your time horizon, training yourself to measure in months and years rather than weeks and days. It is also a matter of finding sources of feedback that operate on shorter timescales, so that you have something to orient toward while the larger results are still forming. The daily practice, the weekly habit, the small sign of progress that is real even if it is not the goal, these serve as the internal feedback that sustains the patience to wait for the external result. Chapter 5. Holding your ground without noise. There are two ways to hold your position under pressure. The first is to defend it loudly, to escalate the argument when challenged, to become more certain in proportion to the opposition, to treat disagreement as an attack that requires a counterattack. This is the visible version of not backing down. It is easy to recognize. It is often mistaken for strength. The second is quieter. It is the maintenance of a clear position without the escalation, without the defensiveness, without the need to win the moment. It is the capacity to hear a challenge, consider it genuinely, and respond without the emotional temperature of the interaction rising. And then, if the challenge has not changed your position, to remain where you are, not through stubbornness, but through the calm clarity of someone who knows why they are where they are. This second form of holding ground is much harder than the first. The first requires primarily adrenaline. The second requires actually knowing what you believe and why, having thought it through sufficiently that the challenge cannot easily knock you off it, and having regulated your emotional response enough that the challenge registers as information rather than as threat. The key word is regulated. Emotional regulation is not the suppression of emotion. It is the management of the channel through which emotion flows, so that it informs your response rather than hijacking it. The person who appears unmoved under pressure is not one who does not feel the pressure. They are usually one who has developed the capacity to feel it and act on their own intentions anyway. This capacity is built through practice, primarily, through the gradual development of the pause between stimulus and response, through the habit of asking, when you feel reactive, whether the reactive response is the one you would choose from a calmer place. Through the accumulation of experience that you have survived being challenged before, and that your position, when grounded in genuine reasoning, does not need defending through volume. The person who can hold their ground quietly is one of the most difficult people to knock off course. Not because they are inflexible, they can hear new information and update, but because their position is grounded in something that does not wobble when the room gets heated. Chapter 6. The Discipline of Self-Renewal. Quiet strength, like any resource, requires replenishment. This is the part of the strength conversation that gets skipped in cultures that value output above all else. The narrative of strength tends to be about what goes out, the effort, the discipline, the perseverance. It is less comfortable about what needs to come in. And for people who have developed a strong sense of responsibility, who are genuinely committed to the things they are building, the need for renewal can feel like an indulgence. Something for later, when the urgent things are done. The urgent things are never done. This is one of the most important things to understand about managing a life. If you are waiting for a quiet moment to take care of yourself, the quiet moment is not coming on its own. It has to be built, like everything else that matters, through deliberate commitment. The disciplines of self-renewal are specific to the individual, but they share common features. They are activities that restore something, energy, clarity, perspective, or the simple sense of being a person rather than a function. They take you out of the mode of producing and returning to the mode of receiving. They often involve the body, which is the most honest indicator of your actual state, and which pays the first price when renewal is neglected. For many people, the barrier to renewal is not knowledge, they know what restores them. It is permission, the internal permission to prioritize their own restoration as a legitimate claim on their time, rather than as a luxury that is only available after everything else is done. Here is the reframe. Renewal is not a luxury. It is a maintenance discipline. The machine that is never serviced eventually breaks down. And the breakdown always comes at a worse time than the maintenance would have, and costs more to repair. The person who is genuinely strong enough to sustain the contribution they want to make over the long term is the person who treats self-renewal as a non-negotiable input, not an occasional reward. Chapter 7. The Power of Not Reacting in Relationships. Every relationship in your life is a context for the expression or the erosion of quiet strength. Relationships test stillness. Can you remain grounded when the other person is not? Relationships test patience. Can you maintain investment when the return is not immediate? Relationships test consistency. Do you show up the same way on ordinary days as you do on important ones? Relationships test kindness. Can you maintain care for someone when they are difficult to care for? The people who build genuinely enduring relationships are not primarily the ones with the best social skills or the most charisma. They are the ones who bring quiet strength to the ordinary moments of connection. The ones who are reliably present. Who tell the truth even when it would be easier not to. Who remember what matters to the other person. Who weather conflict without abandoning the relationship. Who say the thing they mean instead of the thing that is easiest to say. This is not romantic in the way that the dramatic version of love is romantic. It does not make good cinema. But it is what love actually looks like across decades. The small choices to show up, pay attention, be honest, and remain present even when presence costs something. There is a particular form of quiet strength that matters enormously in relationships. The ability to be truly present for another person. Not present in the sense of being physically in the room, but present in the sense of genuinely attending. Listening not to respond but to understand, caring not about how you come across but about what the other person needs in this moment. This quality is rarer than it sounds. Most social interaction involves at least partial attention being allocated to self-management, to how you appear, to what you will say next, to your own comfort with the emotional tenor of the exchange. Being genuinely present requires temporarily releasing that self-management. It requires enough security in yourself that you do not need the interaction to go well for you specifically. You can just be there, with them, attending to what is real. That is a quiet strength. And relationships in which it is present are fundamentally different from relationships in which it is absent. Chapter 8. Living from the Inside Out. The deepest version of quiet strength is one that does not depend on the outside. Most of us, more than we would like to admit, are living from the outside in. Our sense of how we are doing is largely assembled from external feedback, from approval or disapproval, from results and recognition, from how other people respond to us. When the feedback is good, we feel capable. When it is absent or negative, we feel uncertain. Our internal state is, to a significant degree, a function of external input. This is not pathological. It is human. We are social animals, and the social environment has always been a meaningful source of information about how well we are navigating the world. The problem arises when external feedback becomes the primary source of self-assessment, when we have no reliable access to our own sense of how we are doing, and must wait for others to tell us. Living from the inside out means developing the internal compass that allows you to assess your own choices and actions without waiting for external validation. It means knowing why you are doing what you are doing, not just what you are doing, and being able to evaluate whether the why aligns with what actually matters to you. It means your sense of integrity comes from your own assessment of whether you are behaving in accordance with your values, not primarily from whether others are praising you for it. This is a lifelong project. The inside-out orientation does not arrive complete. It is built, like the other forms of quiet strength, through practice. Through the deliberate habit of asking yourself what you actually think, feel, and value, before asking what the people around you think of it. Through the development of a relationship with your own judgment that is close enough and honest enough that it can be trusted. The person who lives primarily from the inside out is one of the most free people you can know. Not free from caring about others. That would be isolation, not strength. But free from the anxiety of approval dependence. They do what they think is right because they think it is right, not because they are waiting for someone to confirm it. They can be alone with their own choices without discomfort, because the choices came from a place they trust. That is the quietest and the most durable form of strength there is. Conclusion. Becoming the person who has it. The quiet strength is not a trait you either have or do not have. It is a practice you either engage in or do not. The stillness, the consistency, the kindness under pressure, the patience with long timelines, the groundedness under challenge, the capacity for renewal, the quality of presence in relationships, the orientation toward the inside rather than the outside. These are all skills. They can be developed. They improve with practice and atrophy with neglect, like any other capability. What they require, more than anything else, is the conviction that they are worth developing. In a culture that celebrates the loud version of strength, the quiet version can seem like a disadvantage, too slow, too invisible, too unimpressive in the moment. But look at the people you most trust, most admire, most want to build alongside. Look at what has endured in your own experience. The qualities that lasted were almost never the loudest ones. They were the quiet ones. The quiet strength is available to you. Not as a destination, but as a direction. Not as a state you achieve and maintain perfectly, but as an orientation you choose and return to. The choosing is the practice. The returning is the practice. Begin where you are. The strength is already in the beginning. Key takeaways. Stillness is not passivity. It is the active cultivation of the internal ground from which clear action becomes possible. The capacity to be still is a skill that must be built. Quiet strength is most visible in patterns over time, not in moments. The invisible repetitions, the small, daily choices in ordinary circumstances, are the substance from which character is built. Genuine kindness is harder than detachment. It requires consistent care under conditions that may not deserve your best. It is a discipline, not a default. Patience is the active maintenance of commitment over time, in the face of pressure to abandon it. The patience gap, between doing the right thing and seeing results, is where most people give up. Holding your ground quietly requires knowing why you are where you are. It is easier to be unshaken by challenges when your position is built on actual reasoning, not social momentum. Renewal is a maintenance discipline, not a reward. The person who sustains quiet strength over the long term treats self-renewal as a non-negotiable input to the work. Relationships are the primary context where quiet strength is expressed or eroded. The most enduring relationships are built by consistent presence, honesty, and attention in ordinary moments. Living from the inside out means your sense of integrity comes from your own assessment of your choices, not primarily from external approval. This is the deepest and most durable form of freedom. A note at the end. The world is loud right now. The noise of competing voices, urgent demands, relentless distraction, it makes the quiet strength harder to access and easier to undervalue. It is tempting to match the volume, to operate at the speed the culture demands, to define strength by the standards that are most visible rather than the ones that last. You do not have to. The quiet strength is available to you, in exactly the life you have, starting with the choices you make today. Not as a grand transformation, but as a series of small turns toward stillness, consistency, care, and groundedness. Those turns accumulate. The person they build is worth building.